Hi guys, welcome back to today's video. So today's video is going to be the last doll that I'm making for the Calgary Zoo. So it is a Sitatunga, and this is what one looks like. So it's got these cool little stripe patterns over its body and little tiny tail, and yeah, this one's a big one. It's a bit of a challenge working with this faux fur. It's a very difficult faux fur to work with, yeah, turned out pretty big. I'm onto the last thing for the Calgary Zoo, which are the bongo horns or antlers, and yeah, then I can send them off, and the Calgary Zoo can start using them in their educational programs. So that's really cool. I think this is my third project with them, so that's really cool to be able to do that stuff. But yeah, so this video is going to go through how I made this little Sitatunga. So if you want to know how I made it, keep watching. Alrighty, so if you haven't already seen my sculpting video of how I sculpted the Sitatunga head, check it out. I'll try and remember to link it below, but I never remember that. So it'll be on my YouTube somewhere in the sculpting playlist, and I'll go through the whole process of sculpting the head of the Sitatunga. So once that's done, I start painting all of the pieces that need to be painted. So it's mainly around the eyes, the nose, the mouth, sometimes the ears, and also the feet area as well. So I always prime my pieces with a primer. It's a canvas primer, but I think it works really well for priming polymer clay and resins. The point of priming is to get the surface ready for paint, so it provides a good tooth for the paint to stick to, because sometimes polymer clay and resins can be quite slippery, I guess, and the paint can come off a little bit easier. So I always like to prime my pieces before I paint it, and it also protects the actual polymer clay or resin as well. And I use a brand called Chromacryl, and it's water-based acrylic paint, and I use that to paint most of my pieces. I've never had a problem with painting on any of my pieces with it reacting weird or anything like that, but I always suggest to actually try painting on a little bit first. That doesn't matter, just to see how it reacts and see how the paint sits on the surface of it, because sometimes you can have weird reactions between different types of paints and resins and stuff. So for the hooves in this one, this is a sculpture that I did. I molded and cast in resin. It was originally for my stag dolls, because they're a similar size to these dolls that I'm making now. So I thought it was a good idea to use a resin foot. It's a lot stronger than polymer clay as well, so there's less risk of it breaking, because polymer clay can be a bit more fragile than resin. And I'm just painting it up again using that Chromacryl acrylic paint, and in different colors, and brown this time. And I basically did sort of a dry brush technique over the hoof area. Moving on to the faux fur. So this faux fur was kind of difficult to find. The Sitatunga fur is quite short, not as short as minky fabric, so I didn't want to use minky fabric because it was a little bit longer. So I had to search high and low for this particular fabric in this right color. And so this is the fabric that I found to be the closest of the reference images that I was given. As you can see, it's quite a thin pile, quite a short pile, but it is longer than a minky fabric pile. And this faux fur is really hard to work with. It's quite hard to cut. It's very similar to the faux fur that I used for the King Penguin chick and the lemur dolls that I made a while ago for them, for the Calgary Zoo. So very similar faux fur, and is really difficult to cut and really difficult to work with the pile as well. But I used a small pair of sharp scissors to cut these. I tried a couple of different scissors to see how best it cuts. So I switched to a smaller pair of scissors here, which I thought cut a little bit better. It's just got a smaller blade, and you can sort of insert it in between the pile and cut the backing a little easier. So you want to get some sharp scissors to cut a fabric like this. It's like a woven fabric, like a silky woven fabric. It's got a really smooth texture, so I think that's why the scissors have quite a difficult time in cutting this type of fabric. But yeah, we got there in the end. So once it was all cut out, I could start pinning it all together, and I'll be sewing it up on a sewing machine. The pattern for this one I created myself, so I'm not sure if I'm gonna put it up on my Patreon for the printable of the month. Possibly. It's a big doll, so it's a big pattern, but it will work for possibly like a deer pattern or something, so I may or may not. Let me know in the comments if you are interested in this sort of pattern, and yeah, I might be able to put it up in my on my Patreon for my what is it, $5 and up tiers? Yeah, so I've sewn this up on the sewing machine now, so I've left the back end open, also the leg area and the head area, and that way I can flip it the right way around. Luckily this is a big doll, so not very hard to flip it. If you have trouble, I recommend using a blunt tool, like a wooden tool with a round end, and that way you can sort of coax it through the open holes, especially around the leg area. You can sort of feed it through. I wouldn't recommend using a metal sharp tool because you will puncture the hole in the actual body, and then you'll have to sew it up anyway by hand or close that hole. But yeah, so this is what the body looks like. I'll probably have to do some more refining with hand sewing just to make sure I've got the body right and all of the curves and stuff right. And then I can start making the armature. So I'm using a ball and socket armature. I have quite a bit of stock in my shop of these ball and socket armatures, so head over there if you're interested in that. I also have some videos over on my Patreon on how to put these together. So I have a couple of videos on a couple of different dolls and different sizes, so you can check that out again for my $5 and up tiers if you're interested in that. So once I've inserted the armature inside the body, I can start gluing all the pieces together. So I use a tacky fabric glue to glue my fabric to polymer clay or resin pieces, and I'd recommend using a tacky clear fabric glue, not anything like PVA or Mod Podge or Elmer's glue. I wouldn't recommend using anything like that. Just a specific fabric glue that is for fabrics. I find it works really well attaching and adhering to the fur and the resin as well. So once that's nice and stuck on there, I can start sewing everything up. So I use a ladder stitch to sew up all of the loose ends on my doll. You want to get yourself a good quality thread as well, because there is a risk of, when you use cheaper thread, it's really easy to snap. So you don't want to do all this sewing only to have your thread snap and then have to sew it all over again. So I use Gutermann thread, and I find it's really good quality. Better still, if you can find some upholstery thread, it's really, really good as well, and it's quite strong, and you can pull it shut quite tight without the risk of it snapping. Same deal, I'm sewing up the tail here because it's a bit of a different tail and it's quite small, so I'm combining that body fabric with some longer white fabric, and if you look at a Sitatunga, the tail, it's a little bit fluffy white, and it's a little bit longer than what the fabric is that I've used. So I'm just sewing these two pieces together again with the ladder stitch, and I'll be sewing it onto the doll body. So once this is all sewn up, I'm going to add a little bit of colouring to the white section. So I'm using a stained Sharpie, and I can't get these anymore in Australia for some reason. They must have stopped making them, and I'm just sort of brushing on a little bit of black colouring onto the tail. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to cut out some of those white patterns that you can see on the Sitatunga body. So I'm using the same fabric, but this time in a white colour, and I'm cutting out some basic shapes of what I want to attach to the body. So I have a tutorial on 2 different methods that I used for both this doll and my bongo dolls for attaching stripes. So So you can check that out over on my Patreon. It's for my $5 and up tiers. It's on there already, so you'll get access to that video as soon as you join a tier. And yeah, I'll go through, it's a video tutorial, and it goes through the whole process of 2 different processes of attaching stripes and patterns to bodies. So yeah, check that out. Link is in my description. It's a lot less time consuming the way that I did it on this doll. But for the bigger pieces, I also sewed these sections on using a ladder stitch once again, but that was only for the bigger sections of these dolls. Alright, so once that is done, I can start applying some faux fur to the head. So I'm just adding a little bit of darker colouring on to the muzzle sort of area, just because I want that to be a bit darker when I'm looking at my reference images. That little section of fur is quite thin and also quite dark, so I wanted to add that colouring on top of the muzzle before I attach anything onto the head. So yeah, just going ahead and adding the faux fur to the face. It was really difficult to work with this faux fur, like I said before, especially when you're applying some things onto the face. Really difficult to work with, but yeah, pretty happy with the way it turned out though. So it just took a lot longer than what normally would take. So once that's done, I can go ahead and just add some more little details around the eyes and the nose and stuff like that, any patterns on and markings on the face, and then just finishing off the whole doll and making sure those white sections are sewn on everywhere that needed to be sewn on, and then it's pretty much finished. So this was my last doll for the Calgary Zoo. Really excited to get this finished. I'm on to the bongo horns, which is the last thing, so hopefully I can get those out in the next couple of weeks and send these pieces to the Calgary Zoo. But anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. It helps my videos get out to everyone else. And if you want a little bit more, I have a Patreon, which you can join, like I said before. Link is in the description. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, Creatures of Nat, and my shop, creaturesofnat.com. And I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!